about a year ago. Urban Dharma, this whole time, has operated completely on a donation model. So like public radio, in the sense that it's available, it's free for whoever wants to tune in, if you will. And it also exists because of the generosity of others. So in our case, we have many donors across the planet who give sustaining membership to see that the lights are on in this place, that the Zoom bill is paid, and so forth. So thank you all very much for being here. Part of what's needed to keep this place going is people coming to programs and being here for there to be something to happen. So thank you all very much for being here. And now, without further ado, I'll hand it to Dr.
Good evening to all of you. I hope you can hear. From time to time, it might kind of tune in and out. So we are trying to get a better sound system in here installed. We got this installed recently, and we've been having movie nights as well. So the next movie night that is coming up, there is a flyer there. That is, it's a very interesting, it only lasts for an hour, this documentary of a Tibetan Buddhist nun. This documentary was done in the last 5-10 years. It's been very hard for outsiders to get into Tibet in the last 10-15 years. Before that, I was going routinely. It wasn't that hard, but it has gotten harder again. But that they were able to go in and document this nun that basically left her nunnery in central Tibet and to go towards eastern Tibet and her journey. So anyway, if you're interested, come join us. The details are there. As I say, we're trying to improve our sound system as well to make it a better experience for everyone here. And as we said to people, if you are coming to the temple in person, you don't have to register, but we're still going to pass around. Do we have something to pass around? Yes, so we're going to pass around a sign-in sheet whereby we'll take your email address and your name, and we're going to register you. The reason being that that's how we get the announcement out for this class, in case it's winter now, in case there are cancellations, and also in case you can't come here weekly. Once this class is over, within a day or two, we hope, we would upload this class onto YouTube, and then we'll send you the link. So in case you're not here, or some days that you're at home, you don't feel like coming out, you can also join us on Zoom. So we're going to register you by getting your email, if you don't mind. That way, then, you know, for whatever reason, you can still follow the class. Then, of course, there is a suggested donation for the course. If you can help us out there, as Nathan says, you know, this is a completely donation model. The other point, I don't know if he said, I tune out, sorry, is that everyone is 100% volunteer here, and nobody is on payroll, myself included. So it's very low overhead. We have to pay the landlord, we have to pay utilities, and it's a pretty prime spot. So there are some commitments that we have to fulfill. Anyway, thank you for your interest in this course. So this course is designed to have two parts to it. The first part is the lecture part, and the second part, I've called it the practicum. So what the second part does is to give you a taste, a flavor of what Buddhist practice looks like. It's not necessarily a traditional full-on, you know, now you got to sit on the floor and you got to put your right leg on your left thigh and your left leg on your right thigh, or whatever, you can imagine or cannot imagine what formal Buddhist practice is, but rather a taste in terms of getting behind the actions, to get an idea like what could be going on inside. And so like today, for example, we're going to raise this question: what is mind? Yeah, what is mind? And to look at it from the perspective of an experiential questioning of what is mind? What is this thing called mind? Yeah, so the second part goes in this kind of practice experiential oriented. The first part is fairly, you could say, it's an intellectual history as well as an intellectual presentation of the Buddhist system, so to say. So that at the end of these 8 classes, you should have a fairly good idea of the Buddhist tradition, in which some might even argue under the umbrella of the Buddhist tradition, there is more than one religion. Like Buddhism in the plural. Now, I will come out right to say, from my perspective, that's a good thing. Buddhism in a plural. I've always kind of held to this belief that the problem is not, that we are not one. The problem is we have a hard time accepting that we are not one. And that happens in religion as well, of all places, that we cannot accept that we're simply not one. I mean, of course, we are one in many other ways, right? We don't tend to fight over those things that we all know instinctively that we are one, that we all breathe, that we all need oxygen. I don't remember anyone fighting over that, because how do you fight over that? Where we often fight is not being able to simply accept and perhaps even celebrate the fact that we are not all identical. So yeah, sure, why not? Buddhism in the plurals. And you'll see fairly quickly my approach to presenting the Buddhist tradition in all its diversity is to also say, well, I don't really have, and I don't really feel a need to say, oh, these Buddhists got it right. Those Buddhists, I don't know, maybe they messed up. And it's not just political correctness at all, or even. But I do believe that diversity within the Buddhist tradition and within all different traditions is something that the more we seek understanding, the more we can see how historical forces in different places, plus the basic resources that the historical Buddha provided, led to a blossoming of different answers. Yeah, different answers that made sense to enough people so that it continues to this day. Yeah, there's a reason why certain traditions continue and certain traditions don't continue. If they continue, that means on some level, it's answering certain questions, right? And then from that perspective, who am I to deny that it is answering some of the questions and some of the needs of this community or that community? Yeah, so that's kind of like the general approach that I'm going to take to presenting the material in this course. So I'm a historian at heart in some ways. I see that everything has its context. Not that everything is merely a product of context. Clearly there are people and there are instances where people can break out of their context and bring something really like wow, right? But nonetheless, the context helps us to understand the text, so to say. So for this course, we're going to start with the very first lecture, which is Siddhartha's world, the historical context. So now, technical support, can we get the slides up? So that, yeah, so we have a lot of friends in different places. Huh? It's on the folder if you go look. Yeah, actually, wave over there. They see you from that camera there. Go to the folder. Things are usually labeled quite clearly. So with our friends joining us from all over the place, I can see there are people in, let's see, Little Rock, Arkansas. There is friends in Leon, Mexico, Penang, Malaysia. Do I see Singapore, maybe? So yeah, we have people from everywhere joining us. First, apologies to those of you who are joining us from somewhere else through Zoom. We're not able to, at least at this point, take questions from you guys. We will start figure out the flow of things here first, and then if it looks like it works, then we're going to also extend the asking a question, raising a hand at any point. So let me see if I can handle you guys first. And the way I like to do it is that, within reason, even while I am doing the lecture, you can raise your hand and say, can you pause right there? I have a quick question. If you really think it will help clarify for everyone, that's really appreciated. So don't be shy to do that, yeah? Are we good? Okay. Who controls that? Do we know who controls that? The next slide? That's it? I don't think so. Okay. Uh-oh. How do we go back? Uh-oh. Okay, you control. Okay, go back. When I used to teach college, I said I use PowerPoint in an unpowered way. No fancy stuff, just it's just like instead of the chalkboard. So the first lecture is Siddhartha's world and the historical context. Okay, next slide. So if we are lucky, I hope to cover these 4 points. Yeah, starting with a real fast chronology of Indian history. You don't have to remember any dates, but I think it helps to know what came first, what came next, and how long ago are we talking about, right? So that's all you need to know. Don't worry about all the details of the dates, right? Then the second point we're going to focus on is this period starting from the 8th century BCE, which is sometimes also called the second urbanization period in India. So you're like, wait, when was the first? The first happened something earlier. We're going to look at that when we look at the chronology. Then within the context of 8th century BCE, of course, there's so many things you can talk about that civilization during that time, but our interest is really more on the cultural, philosophical, religious, spiritual background. So in terms of that, we're going to look at this tradition called Brahmanism, and then there is another tradition that has been identified as the Shramanas. And then finally, these 6 heretical teachers. Okay, sources are always biased. So these are the 6 heretical teachers according to Buddhist sources. Out of these 6 heretical, quote-unquote heretical teachers, one tradition actually continues to the present day. But of course, don't trust the Buddhists to give an accurate representation of any of these 6 heretical teachers. Yeah. But nonetheless, I think it will help us understand why the Buddha taught what he taught and what might he be teaching in response to what was around him. So that's why we're going to take a look at the 6 heretical teachers. So for that purpose, right? Don't need to know, did these people really believe that? Right? Did these teachers really taught those things? Sufficient to know, for the Buddha's audience, the Buddha is speaking within that context, and in some ways positioning himself differently from these 6 positions. So in that way, it will help us get a clearer understanding of the historical Buddha's position by looking at how he characterized other positions. So that's why we're looking at these 6 heretical teachers. So please don't get worked up with like, were they heretical or not? It's just what they were called in Buddhist sources, okay? Next. So a brief chronology of Indian history. So before the Bronze Age, obviously there were other things going on, and you can learn other things about pre-Bronze Age India. But where we want to start is to understand that in the Bronze Age, there was a major civilization that existed in what we today call India and Pakistan. So it was in the, could you click? It's in the north western corner of what's today India and Pakistan. So this shaded, the darker shaded area, that is the extent of the Indus civilization. So if you look here, it says Harappan culture, and those are some of the major sites. So you see that site up there called Harappa, and then another site further down this side called Mohenjo-daro. So these were 2 major sites of the Indus civilization. Let's go back to before. And that civilization began somewhere around 3300 BCE. At the height of that civilization, the population reached about 5 million. Contemporaneous elsewhere in the world, 2 other major civilizations existed. They were in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Then together with the Indus Valley, these were the 3 largest kind of human civilizations on Earth during that time. But the height of this civilization was between 2600 to 1900 BCE. It is at that point you get populations of 4 to 5 million. There were vast cities, so Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. This culture had a script. We call them the Indus script, and it's named after the main river, the Indus River, which is also where the name Hindu comes from. Hindu is not an indigenous Indian term. It was a term that the earliest, it was a term used by the British to refer to the people in India. Then somehow there it went from there into now you have the Hindu religion. But originally it's a geographic area, Indus. So there is a writing system. They do have a writing system, but until now, no one has been able to decipher. So they have documents, but we have no idea what the documents are saying. It was, and they had cities, clear urban planning, laying out of buildings and public drainage system, multi-storied buildings, So it was very advanced civilization, given what period that we're talking about. Now, for reasons that are unclear, and now I think people are looking in the direction of climate change. Some major kind of series of events that caused the collapse of this culture, this civilization. Yes, so that by 1900 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization basically disappeared. So the cities were abandoned. I think lack of food due to climate change probably caused cities cannot be supported. Cities essentially are, parasites. We don't produce, we just consume. Yeah, so then people had to go back out and disperse. So then the next significant culture to arise in this area that we now call South Asia is during the Iron Age, and that's the Vedic culture. Now, Vedic culture is very important because the main religion and the main beliefs from the Vedic period continues to the present day. Not exactly the same, but developed out of that. So Hindus today, for example, will say their tradition is Vedic or Vaidika. Vedic is almost a way to say it's orthodox. We are the orthodox tradition. So in fact, Hindus will refer to the Buddhist system, which also came out of the Indian context, as heresy, because they reject the authority of the sacred scriptures that emerge from this period, which is called the Vedas. So the composition of the Vedas happened around this time. And Vedic civilization is unlike the Indus Valley. They did not have large cities. They were nomadic, and these were what we call the Indo-Aryan tribes that seem to have originated from Central Asia. And one wave of this migration went towards Europe, went towards Iran, and another wave came down towards South Asia. Now, I have to footnote this to say that this theory is often challenged by Indian historians. They don't like this theory that their most sacred traditions came from outside of India. We won't get into that debate, but I thought you should know that there are some objections to this theory. But generally, I would say, putting aside feelings about, did our culture come from somewhere else or develop from within, generally it's accepted that the Indo-Aryan tribes came out of Central Asia, and one wave went to Europe, and so European languages and the languages that are spoken in India, they all have basically the same root. Yeah. Now, this particular culture mostly were in the northwest area, so same as the Indus Valley area. So the most sacred text of this culture is called the Vedas. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is Indus Valley civilization during the mature phase. And so, yes, so this is like a northwestern, okay, so next slide. So these are some of the sites from the Indus Valley. Down here is the script. Not those animals, but what's hovering above the animals. is the ancient Hindu script. Those over there as well. You see how these cities are laid out, and with like lots of like bathrooms. So it seems like a lot of emphasis on cleaning and cleansing, perhaps related to spiritual cleansing as well, although we really don't know. Maybe they just like to swim. I mean, who knows? It's funny how when we look at ancient cultures, we find something and we think, oh, it must be religion. Well, no, they were having a good time. Who knows, right? Somehow, like ancient people were more religious. So whatever we find, like these statues, it's become common to say, oh, they must be the gods. No, they are like ancient Barbies. Hello. It could also be that, right? So anyway, next. So we don't know because we can't read the Hindu script, so we don't know what were the religious beliefs, what was the worldview of that earliest civilization. But we do know about the Vedas because the Vedas come down to this point, right? These Vedic. So we are able to know what Vedic beliefs were and now are. First of all, the Veda was composed in a form of Sanskrit that predates what's known as classical Sanskrit. And so in fact, the Sanskrit of the Vedas, many parts today, nobody understands what it's saying. That's why it's a challenge to try to translate that. I mean, you can read all the alphabets, but it's like, what does it mean? And so you can translate even, you can find words in English, but you're like, what does this mean? So the Vedas were composed in a Proto-Sanskrit that by the time of the 8th century BCE, which is the main period that we're going to be looking at, it's clear that many people already don't know what the Vedas actually mean, like intellectually. However, according to the Brahmanical religion that developed out of this material, it is said that it does not matter. Because the potency of the Veda lies in its sonic qualities. The sound. Proper transmission and the proper making of these sounds that are in the Vedas is more important than knowing what these words are saying. So they even developed this idea that our whole material universe, it's possessed. That this whole material universe, is a how do you say? The sounds of the Vedas is what the material universe manifests out of. So at its most basic level, everything that exists as vibrations of the sounds of the Vedas. And so they develop, you could say they develop this explanation in part because they don't know what it means. Yeah. So this is another instance of like people finding meaning and making sense based on what they are given. But don't get me wrong, there are also many other parts of the Vedas that clearly is comprehensible. So there are four. The Vedas is a collection of different texts divided into 4 sections. The oldest section is the one that is the hardest to really understand what it is saying because its language is so archaic. That's called the Rig Veda. Then the other materials found in other collections consists of instructions on how to use the hymns, and the Rig Veda They are a collection of hymns. Hymns that are addressed to different gods, talking about the exploits of the gods, praising the gods. So then other texts in the Vedas explain when you perform this hymn, where you perform this hymn, for what purpose. So some other parts of the Veda has a lot of ritual details, which is how to use the hymns of the Rig Veda for a battle. So do you know what's going on?
Someone annotate?
Oh, okay, let's reshare it. How about there? It's a little distracting, yeah? Okay. Okay. Did you go to the next order already, or go back to the last slide? Where we're here? Okay. So in this Vedic world, some of the other things that would be helpful for us to know is that the idea that this universe and its order came as a result of a cosmic sacrifice. So sacrifice is how you keep order. So the major religious activity is sacrifice, and sacrifice by putting things into the fire. A lot of times it's grains and fruits, and sometimes it involves animals, and there's some hints that perhaps there's human, but no real evidence of that. But definitely grains, butter, plants, and pressed juice of a plant called soma, which some believe has hallucinogenic properties. Because not only do you offer it into the fire, you also drink that as some kind of communion. Yes, so the idea is that through sacrifice, order is established. So the sacrifice of Purusha means the person. And so this is how the belief that at the beginning, before this universe came into existence, there was this being called Purusha. And Purusha sacrificed himself in order to bring this universe into existence. So there is this kind of play of the sacrificer is what is being sacrificed. Yeah. So this becomes the basis for, in a more interesting form, I think, the development of what we call non-dual traditions, which some forms of Buddhism really also kind of find that to be a powerful way of thinking about what is reality. So the roots of this non-dual can in some ways be traced back to this cosmic myth, that this whole universe came out of the result of a sacrifice. Who was sacrificing? Purusha was sacrificing. What was Purusha sacrificing? Purusha was sacrificing himself. And that's how order came into existence. Then, on a daily basis, everyone should perform this form of sacrifice that is appropriate to their station in life. There are prescribed rituals that you have to do. And it's all dependent on which varna you belong to, which is often translated as caste. But it's better translated as class, because caste is related to occupation. In the beginning, these four classes is not so much tied to occupation. But anyway, the four classes are the Brahmana class, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. Within the classes, there are subcastes, and that is very much occupation. But the Brahmanas are the learned ones. They are the priests. But these priests don't necessarily perform rituals for others. In fact, the highest Brahmanas, in English we call them Brahmins. The highest Brahmins do not perform rituals for others because that makes them less pure. The highest brahmanas are supposed to spend their time learning, studying, memorizing the Vedas, transmitting the Vedas. Right? And they are often the poorest. Although they are the highest of the highest in this system of the 4 classes, they are often the poorest because part of their sanctity comes from the fact that they don't pay attention to material wealth. And society supports them. So in this system, everyone is obligated to give to the Brahmins. Now, there are also a lot of Brahmins who are people who make a living performing rituals for others or educating other people's kids for a fee. Then the Kshatriyas are the warriors, the kings, the warriors, the administrators. Vaishyas are the farmers, and Shudras are the people who make things. Yeah, so these are the 4 classes, and it's all related to also, it's said that the Brahmins came about through Purusha's eyes. And the Kshatriyas is Purusha's hands. And Vaishyas are Purusha's body, and Shudras are Purusha's legs. Yeah? So in this culture, purity is determined by how high you are in this class system. So if you're Brahmin, you're ritually the purest. If you're Shudra, you're ritually the most impure. So the mixing of the classes was a cause of concern. Yeah. Next slide. So these are some images of the type of fire sacrifice that has continued to the modern times. Yeah, so this is the geographic area of the late Vedic period. Mainly what I want you to see is over here. So there are 2 rivers, the Yamuna River and the Ganga River, and it meets, these 2 rivers meet somewhere around here, and to the west of is where Vedic culture dominated. To the east of this confluence of the 2 rivers is this area on the eastern side of northern India, this region called Greater Magadha, or at least, I mean, historians now call this culture here the Greater Magadha cultural sphere. And this is the homeland of Buddhism. Yeah. So this is the homeland of Buddhism, this area, rather than this area, right, geographically. So let's go to the next slide. So in the 8th century BCE, which corresponds with also the second urbanization, what we begin to see is that the first urbanization is the Indus Valley. Yeah, the Vedic cultures did not establish huge cities. There were lots of towns and villages, very populous. But so there are all these towns and villages. Can you go back to the map? In this area. But the second time that the South Asian continent saw the rise of cities, it was starting from the 8th century BCE and concentrated in this area. So in this area, during the Buddha's time, there was 16 kingdoms, and each of the kingdom built cities. Next slide. So new states started to form. Eventually there were 16, starting around 500 BCE. And during this time, continuing from the Vedic tradition, is the rise of a collection of sacred text scriptures called the Upanishads. Eventually, the Upanishads were folded into the Veda and considered a section of the Vedas. Then, outside of this context, we see the rise of these movements, spiritual movements that are identified as Shramanas. Shramanas translate to something as someone who has gone forth, someone who has left. And what that's referring to is they have left their biological family. They have wandered off to become hermits, to become ascetics. If we were studying this 20, 50 years ago, the theory was the Shramana movements came out of the Vedic context. But the latest scholarship is showing that no, the Shramana movements were concentrated, back the map, that were concentrated in this area. And that this Magadha area with the 16 kingdoms had enough of an independent spiritual cultural tradition that was in contrast to what was going on here. So this is really interesting as we, in the next few lectures, because a lot of the books that you read today will say that, you know, the Buddha operated within a spiritual context where the Brahmins were in charge. But actually, if you really look at the Buddhist text, so I remember when I was a graduate student and we were studying that, then when we look at the Buddhist text, and the Buddhist texts don't talk about the Varna system. And when they did talk about the Varna system, it didn't match the form. There's like some other weird stuff. It says, oh, well, there are the warriors, and then there are the this, and then that. You're like, wait, where are the 4 Varnas? And I remember how we would just explain it away and say, oh, well, you know, Buddhist texts, they're just confused. But now there's enough scholarship to make the case that, there's something else going on in this area that is actually quite different from the Vedic religion. Go to the next slide. So this is one thing important to remember. So these Shramana movements, what they all had in common is the idea of renunciation, leaving your biological family, forming these new communities that are celibate, that do not reproduce. And the idea is to solve the problem of rebirth. In the Vedas, there is no hint of anything like rebirth, reincarnation. And in the Vedas, when the word karma is used, it's not the way we would think of karma today. Karma in the Vedic material refer to ritual actions. And so like those fire sacrifices, that's a type of karma. And that ritual sacrifices, ritual performances, is the karma that maintains the world. But in the Magadha area, they have a different take on what karma is. Whereas in the Vedic side, karma is a good thing. In the Magadha area, karma is a problem to be solved. And the Buddha has his own position on what karma is. And so vis-a-vis in relation to the 6 heretical teachers, he had his own understanding of what karma is. And I think that is another important point that will become more obvious as we go on with this course. So let's go to the next. So here is the Magadha area with the 16 kingdoms over here. Next. So now we have arrived at the 16 heretical teachers. But before I go into this, your questions? Comments?
Where is Tibet?
Oh, Tibet doesn't enter the picture until much, much later. Geographically, Tibet is to the north, on the other side of the Himalaya. Yeah, but Tibet doesn't enter this picture until way later. Buddhism turns up in Tibet around 8th century. We are still on the other side of BC. Yes.
So, like, if the Vedas and stuff aren't that involved with the Magadha culture where Siddhartha was, like, I've heard he questioned Brahmanism and the Vedas.
Exactly.
So how does he question it?
That's the old story.
He's just not really that involved.
Correct. You want to take over the lecture? Exactly. That's how we used to think about it. That, Siddhartha questioned the Vedic tradition or the Brahmanical religion, questioned the authority of the Brahmins and all of that. And so then he went off to go find his own answers. Maybe not. In fact, in the earliest Buddhist, Buddhist scriptures are also not all composed at one time, there's a whole history to that. The earliest layer of the Buddhist text, when they used the name Brahmin, it was used in a nice way. Like if you look at the Dhammapada, there's a whole section that says, like a Brahmin has these qualities, these qualities, these qualities, these qualities. So it seems like in the Magadha area, not only they are not so Vedic based, they also don't have a fight to pick with that tradition. It's simply, this is not our stuff. Those guys over there believe it. Yeah? The scenario seems to be more along those lines. Of course, they knew what each other believed. Like over there, they accepted the authority of the Brahmins. We in the Magadha area, Brahmins are not so important. But accepting the authority of the Brahmins is a main focus, the Vedic tradition and the Brahmanical religion. Brahmanical religion is, again, a term that historians use to describe the religion of the Vedas. And at the heart of that is the special status of this group of people, the Brahmins, and the duty of others, non-Brahmins, to support Brahmins. Yeah. Yes.
Well, like I remember we have those books at our house. Like it talks about. I don't know if it talks about the Vedas. I want maybe it's the Vedas, but like there's 6 pieces written on like pieces of bark or something. You mentioned. What is that?
That's the Hindu tradition, yeah, all the different scriptures, and then later they have the Upanishads, and then they have the Mahabharata, they have the Ramayana. William is talking about this series of comic books. It's called Amachittakatha. When I was a kid, I read them. They were the pre-Marvel Asian, and it's quite fantastical. I think way better material than the made-up Marvels. This is made up a long time ago. They just need Hollywood to be interested in it, and man, those stories, there are stories within stories within stories within stories, go in so many directions. Yeah. So all of this, right? I hope, if I can keep your interest, yeah, and you can remember some of these things, because we are going to revisit this when we look at the Buddha. Right? And you're going to go, oh, I see. Now let's come to, so this is part of the context, right? So what we know is that Siddhartha was born in later sources say, in a royal family. Father was king and he was the crown prince, right? Well, later sources. More accurate, he was born to an aristocratic family, and in fact, his kingdom, the kingdom of the Shakyas, was one of these 16 kingdoms. And we know that in his kingdom, it was not a monarchy. So they could not have a king that we said that his father was a king. Instead, that system there is an oligarchy. So it's a council of elders that collectively made decisions for that kingdom. And you see that form of governance is the form that the Buddha gave to his monastic community. Basically, anyone who has been a monk within that community for more than 10 years gets to vote. And the majority carries the weight of any decision that needs to be made. So the Buddhist monastic order, its original rules and regulations, we think is very much based on the form of governance that the Buddha grew up with, which is an oligarchy. And so anyway, Prince, Crown Prince, very important kid, okay? When he left his kingdom, left his position of privilege, he wasn't unique in that at that point already, there were a lot of people doing that. Yeah, it's like the 60s in the US, you know. People were starting to question, like, what does this all mean? So there were some crises going on, which is, remember the second urbanization, right? The rise of cities? That actually brought its own set of like anxieties and trauma to the culture. With the rise of cities, again, now people came from different places, right? Cities is when people gather from different places, and change is really hard. And then when people gather, ideas start to spread, right? And that's a little unnerving and threatening to some people, idea spreading. Alongside idea spreading, what else is also spreading? Genes are spreading. That's also disturbing to some people. Alongside gene spreading, what else is spreading? Disease also spreading, right? So you can either look at it as half full or half empty. And often probably you look at it as both. But that created some kind of anxiety within, but we can see that in this period, in different parts of the world, this is also when Plato, Socrates, Confucius, Lao Tzu, all these figures, they were active in different parts of the world. So again, if you want to look at it from the perspective of climate, what could be going on in terms of harvest, in terms of people getting enough to eat or not enough to eat, that then cause people to be more sensitive to the question of what does this mean? Why am I here? Why are we here? Is there something more than just providing for my family? You know, what else is there? So that apparently got Siddhartha to join this Shramana movements. And some of these figures here, he actually joined their community. Two figures in particular, they are not in this list, but we know from these two that they were kind of variations of these 6 positions. So these 6 teachers, and so this is another kind of evidence to show that the Vedic tradition and the Brahmanical tradition that represents the Vedic tradition did not figure in the Magadha area, because the Buddhist texts only talk about these 6, and none of them belong to the Brahmanical tradition. There were outright criticisms of these 6, no explicit taking to task the Brahmanical claims. So another kind of evidence that we can see, like perhaps, yeah, the Brahmanical tradition wasn't really an issue. The Brahmanical tradition eventually became a real challenge for the Buddhist tradition. So it's much later that the Buddhists had to kind of defend their turf against the rising power and popularity of the Brahmanical tradition. And so it's from later Buddhist material that you see anti-Brahmin sentiments becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. Insofar as the earliest material and the material that relates to Siddhartha, it's peripheral. Yeah. So anyways, let's look at these 6 positions very quickly. Basically, if we were to use like modern terms, you could say that these 6 traditions teach amoralism, fatalism, materialism, eternalism, restraint, and agnosticism. Okay, we don't have time, right, to go into all of it. I'll give you hopefully an idea, okay? The Purana Kassapa, which here says it's amoralism. So this is what supposedly he taught. This is this teacher talking to this great king in the Magadha area. Because the king, so this is from a Buddhist scripture that said that this famous king visited these 6 teachers. And then eventually he came to the Buddha, what Buddhists call the Buddha, which simply means the awakened one. And then the Buddha says, so where have you been? He said, well, I've been busy, interviewing these 6 great teachers. And so now I'm coming to ask you some questions. So then the Buddha said, okay, tell me what they told you. So then the king reports this. So the king says, Purana Kassapa said to me, great king, in acting or getting others to act, in mutilating and getting others to mutilate, in torturing or getting others to torture, in inflicting sorrow or getting others to inflict sorrow, in tormenting or getting others to torment, in intimidating or getting others to intimidate, in taking life, taking what is not given, breaking into houses, plundering wealth, committing burglary, basically all the bad stuff, right? In doing all of that, one does no evil. Okay? Now, it's not as simple as this. You might think, what? Right? If with a razor-edged disc, one were to turn all the living beings on this earth to a single heap of flesh, a single pile of flesh, there would be no evil from that cause. Even if one were to go along the right bank of the Ganges, killing and getting others killed, again, the whole list, there is no evil cause. Now, on the other hand, if one were to go along the left bank of the Ganges, giving and getting others to give, making sacrifices and getting others to make sacrifices, there will be no merit from that cause, no coming of merit. Through generosity, self-control, restraint, and truthful speech, there is no merit from that cause. Thus, when asked about what is the fruit, what is the goal of a contemplative life visible here and now, Purana Kassapa answered, neutrality, non-action. Don't act. Okay, so to unpack this a little, Purana Kassapa, these 6 heretical teachers, they were not just sitting around philosophizing. They had basically monks following them around. They are serious. This is a spiritual tradition. This is not like, doesn't matter what you do. They were living as ascetics, but they had this philosophy that says, neither committing so-called good nor committing so-called bad produces any meaningful results. Therefore, don't bother with either of them. our spiritual practice is basically avoiding either of those things. To return to a state of neutrality, amoral. Yeah, not immoral, but amoral, to transcend moral choices. Because in the end, moral choices cannot really be made in any meaningful way. So there's something deeper going on. Yeah? But the Buddha rejected this. The Buddha said, that's not how it goes. Another position, kind of an interesting one, this is the one, fatalism. Of course, that word sounds like, right? But again, it's not as simple as it sounds, right? So Makali Goshala, he taught this. Great king, there is no cause, no requisite condition for the defilement of beings. Beings are defiled without cause, without requisite condition, without cause and condition. There is no cause or condition for the purification of beings. Beings are purified without causes or conditions. There is nothing self-caused, nothing caused by other, nothing human caused. There is no strength, no effort, no human energy, no human endeavor. All living beings, all life, all beings, all souls are powerless, devoid of strength, devoid of effort, subject to the changes of fate, serendipity, and nature. They are sensitive to pleasure and pain in the 6 classes of birth, meaning in all forms of life. Then he goes on, and this is kind of an interesting, quite complex. He says, there are 1,406,600 principles, modes of origin. There are 500 kinds of karma, 5 kinds and 3 kinds, full karma and half karma. There are 62 pathways, 62 sub-eons, 6 classes of birth, 8 classes of men, 4,900 modes of livelihood, 4,900 kinds of wanderers, 4,900 kinds of serpents, 2,000 faculties, 3,000 hells, 7 spheres of percipient beings, 7 spheres of non-percipient beings, all these categories, okay? Then, the point is this, having transmigrated and wandered on through all of these, the wise and the foolish alike will put an end to pain. So he taught that there are many lifetimes, and then he says, not here, but in another, here it says it. Through this morality, one might think, through this morality, this practice, this austerity, or this holy life, I will ripen my unripened karma and eliminate ripened karma whenever touched by it. That is impossible, he says. No point doing that. Why? Pleasure and pain are measured out. That means it's all fixed already. How much pleasure or pain you're going to experience is already determined. The wandering on is also fixed, meaning from lifetime to lifetime. How many lifetimes you have to be born is already fixed. There is no shortening or lengthening, no accelerating or deaccelerating, just as a ball of string when thrown comes to an end simply by unwinding. In the same way, having transmigrated and wandered on, the wise and the foolish alike will put an end to pain. So that's their solution to karma. Don't mess with it. Then you're like, well, why do I become an ascetic following you? Because although it is all measured, right? If you follow me, you will live in harmony with that measuring, with what you have been already given. You will learn not to fight it. It's fighting it that is causing you suffering. So don't fight it. So not, the take-home lesson from him is not, it's already fixed, so continue watching your Netflix, continue going for your lattes, everything will be fine. He's like, you see, you're fighting it by doing those things. You should become an ascetic and live a simple life. And just like ultimate chill. Everything will just be fine if you don't fight it. The Buddha also rejected that. Right? The materialism position is basically saying, at the end of this life, everything ends. But it's also a spiritual path. It's not a secular materialism. It's a spiritual materialism, which says that everything will go back. The properties of like hardness in our body goes back to the earth element. The property of movement goes back to the element of wind. Yeah. So then how do you live a good life? You live a good life again by understanding that at the end of this life, everything just disperses. So that has some resonances, I think, with our secular humanist view. So you be a good person, and you can be a really good person, but with the understanding that in the end, everything just goes back to nature, and that's it. The Buddha actually also rejected that. Yes?
Did the Buddha give reasoned arguments against each of the six?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So I guess it's big, extensive, huh?
Yes, yes.
Did you get to study that?
Yes, I have a series on recorded. The last time I taught a course called "What's Karma Got to Do with It?" It's you can listen to it, where each of these positions the Buddha said why is problematic, and then some of these positions, I mean, all of these positions use the notion of karma. Like the materialists, of course, they say there is no past life, there's no future life. And there's no further rhyme or reason except that you're here. Then how do you live a good life now and not cause so much, anguish and problems to anyone, including yourself? Other than that, the other 5, they all have beliefs of past and future lives and what you do with it. So the Buddha, basically in a nutshell, and we're actually going to look at the Buddha's way of talking about karma, which is actually kind of different from, I think, what most of us think what karma is. For the Buddha, karma is basically about the importance of action, and that action is consequential and meaningful. Yeah, it's nothing to do with fate. Oh, it's your karma. Buddha is like, what? The point of it's your karma is that you can change your karma. The point of it's your karma is not, oh, it's your karma. Well, suck it up. It's like, no, it's your karma. Like, do something about it. So basically, at the root of the Buddha's objection to any of these 6 positions is he finds these positions, so I'll give it to you now, then you're like, okay, I don't have to come to that class. The main problem he has with all 6 of these is, he says, if you subscribe to any of them, then it renders action meaningless. Agency is gone. And when agency is gone, and actions, when you believe that actions are meaningless and inconsequential, you will create a lot of suffering for yourself and others. Yeah, so in that sense, you could say the Buddhist tradition then values is an action-oriented tradition. Yeah, but those are sound bites. Yeah. There are nuances that, makes it. So now, 20 minutes or so left. Now we'll switch gears. We're done. Actually, go forward. There might be a picture to see or no? No. Oh, okay, that's it. Good. We don't have to share a screen. We can go back to. So now, the second part of the course is, what is mind? For this second part, I'm actually grounding myself in an episode recorded in this collection called the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. It's not literally 100,000, it just means many. There's about maybe 150 songs. But nonetheless, the title of that book is 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. In this, so this encounter involves, it's chapter 12, and it's called the later visit to Rakma. Rakma is this one area. So the chapter begins, Milarepa is one of the greatest saints, so to say, of Tibet. A very inspiring figure that basically in one lifetime, he says, he went from a great troublemaker. He murdered some people with his magic. But he went from being that to becoming liberated in one lifetime. So in this chapter, he first encounters a couple who basically begs him to stay with them, saying that they will provide him for everything he needs. And so they liked him so much, they say, you stay with us. He's like, no, it's not my style. I prefer to just wander around and live in, isolated places. Then later, in that same area, so they wanted to adopt him actually, and it's like, no, it's okay, So he continued on. Then this is where he meets two cowherds, two young boys. So in that encounter, the younger one says to him, Lama, which is the term you use for a religious teacher. He say, hey Lama, do you have a companion? And Milarepa says, yes, I do. And you say, oh, what is the companion's name? And he says, companion's name is Bodhicitta. Which, of course, for those of you who know that term, you think, oh, it refers to this awakened mind, this resolve to become a Buddha, right? But it's also a common name for Tibetan people, to be called Bodhicitta. So it could be a person. So this boy is thinking, oh, Bodhicitta. Oh, yeah. So where is this Bodhicitta? Then Milarepa says, oh, right now Bodhicitta is in the house of the all-base consciousness, which is also a name. Okay? So the boy is like, oh, okay. And so then, or it could be a place name, right? So then this boy says, so where is this house called all-base consciousness? All-base consciousness means the sort of, you could say, the deepest level of our being. So he's saying, so Milarepa is saying, yes, I have a companion, and that's the awakened mind, the mind of great compassion, motivated to wake up to become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. Where is it? Where is this friend? Oh, it's in the all-base house. And then he's like, okay, where is this all-base house? Right within my body. Then the older boy said, he's a little bit crazy. Let's go. He completely didn't get it, right? It's like, what is this friend? This friend is in this house, and then this house is in this body. So he's like, let's go. But the younger one, he said, wait. And he asked Milarepa, he says, wait, so this all-base house, are you talking about your mind? So he had some wisdom there. Are you talking about your mind? And so the body is the house for the mind? Is that what you're saying? Milarepa says, yes. The body is the house for the mind. Then the boy said, now, in a house, in an ordinary house, there can be one person in there can be 3 persons in there can be 5 persons in there. So let me ask you, within this body, how many minds are there? Yeah, now he got curious. And if there is many, who are they? And what are they like? So Milarepa said, well, why don't you go look and see how many minds are there in that body of yours? So the boy said, oh, okay. Milarepa said, so come back tomorrow and tell me. The next morning, it says here, the younger boy came back and said, Lama, I looked to see how many minds there are and what they are like. And I found that there is no more than one. But this one, if you try and kill it, you can't kill it. If you try to overpower it, you can't. If you try to seize it, you can't grasp it. If you try to push it down, you can't push it down. If you place it, it won't stay. If you send it away, it won't move. If you try to gather it together, it won't gather. If you look at it, it disappears. If you examine it, you can't find it. If you think it exists, it won't show itself. If you think it doesn't exist, it's all over the place. It flickers and flutters, bounces and bounds, flashes and disappears. I can't really say what it is at all. Tell me, what is this? Put aside, so try to imagine this. Yeah? First try to gain the innocence of the boy. Yeah? Whether this incident actually happened or not, beside the point. The story gives us the younger of 2 boys, which says that, which is saying to us, if you really want to know what mind is. So right now, we could say mind, you could say soul, you could say your true self, whatever word you have for that, right? That which is more than just this body, right? We all kind of think there is something there, right? So what this story is telling us is, if you really want to know what that is, first of all, if you are like the older boy, it's not going to work. So you have to be like the younger boy. So younger there connotes a certain innocence, a certain curiosity. So he doesn't have so many fixed ideas. He has not been indoctrinated that it is this, it is that, it is that. He really has this curiosity. So in fact, when you embark on like the Buddhist practice of what is this mind? Like they say, know thyself, right? In order to really know thyself, you have to begin from a position of innocence, curiosity. In the Tibetan academic tradition, it says, the main problem that we all commit is over-deciding and under-investigating with regards to everything. Immediately, we meet something, we hear something, we smell something, we touch something, we see something, we have decided. I like, I don't like. This is agreeable, this is not agreeable. It says, that is where our problem is. We are constantly over-deciding and under-investigating, meaning We let appearances deceive us. So you have to be curious. What is it? What is this mind? And know that all the terms that we use, they are just labels. They are not it. You call it divine self. You call it soul. You call it your true self. We call it mind. We call it Buddha nature. We call it Atman, whatever. All these are simply labels. And the labels can just be as misleading as the older boy going, what is this nonsense he's talking about? His companion, Susie, is in his body. What is this? Because the name Bodhicitta could also just be like Susie, right? So names and labels simply, we miss the point if we think that word is what we're talking about. But the boy, and his response, right? You might think, wait, why is he talking about, like, if you try to kill it, if you try to overpower it, if you try to seize it, if you try to push it down, if you try to gather it. So you have to imagine that he's really like, what is this mind? What is this self? What is this divine self? Can I kill it? Because there's no like, ooh, right? Some kind of reverence, like, oh, it's holy. Can I kill it? As a boy would say, like, what is it? Poke it and see. Right? Okay, can't kill it. Can I make it a friend? Doesn't seem to want to cooperate. Maybe it's not there. Oh man, it's all over the place. And once you think it's all over the place, and someone says, here, show it to me. You can't. In the Zen tradition, the first patriarch of Zen in China is an Indian guy called Bodhidharma. And in the legend of the first transmission of the Dharma to the next generation in China, there was one Chinese monk who heard about this great Indian monk that has carried the essence of Buddhism from India to China. At that point, China has already had a few hundred years of Buddhist exposure, Buddhist translation of texts and everything. But somehow, there's also a feeling among many that the essence has not arrived yet. So now here comes this strange Indian monk called Bodhidharma, and rumor has it that he has brought the essence that is not in the books. That is not in the books. So there's this one Chinese monk called Huike, his name, who went looking for Bodhidharma. And basically he got the treatment of, if you all remember, Fight Club, which is kneel outside and wait until the master gives you any attention. So he's kneeling there for days and days and days. And then it started snowing and snowing and snowing. And it's saying that the snow came up to about, his chest. And Bodhidharma was inside the cave and he was outside. And then finally, Bodhidharma, oh no, more dramatic. Finally, out of desperation to get Bodhidharma's attention, this is really bizarre. He lopped off one of his hands with a big knife and threw it into the cave. What? Never mind, right? Dramatic effect. White snow, blood spluttering everywhere. He throws this hand into the cave to get Bodhidharma's attention. Bodhidharma turns around and say, what do you want? And then he says, I want your help. And he says, help with what? I want you to help me pacify my mind. Bodhidharma said, I'll do it. So Huike was ecstatic, worth, sacrificing an arm. And Bodhidharma said, so give it to me. I'll pacify it for you. And that moment, Huike said, but I can't find it. Bodhidharma said, there, done. Later, not later, other sources said that Huike lost his arm during an attempt by bandits to rob him. So we do know probably Huike only had one arm. As to how he lost his arm, over time it got kind of exaggerated that he lopped off his arm and gave it to this strange Indian monk. Thankfully, it did not become a tradition among Zen people. Like, give me an arm, I'll tell you. But it's good story, So this mind, what is mind? That is in some ways the beginning of Buddhist practice. A curiosity about what is it? What is this mind? So don't, so if you want to try this exercise, right? Between this week and next week, without any kind of very formal way, from time to time and go, who am I? Basically, that's the question, right? Without technical language, what am I? Who is the true me? What is it? And every time you come up with an answer, scrutinize that answer. Where is that answer coming from? Concepts? Philosophies? Theories? Rumors? Even the best instructions the Buddha can give are at best rumors. It has been rumored, but we say it's a reliable rumor, but nonetheless hearsay. So until this hearsay becomes real for you, it remains hearsay. But this searching for this mind is what's going to open the door to an understanding of what is this? Yeah, what is this? What is it that knows? What is it that is suffering? And what is it that is experiencing happiness? Technical Buddhist, in the Buddhist tradition, there's a lot of technical terms, for sure. And even mind, the English word mind is such a limited word. And there's so many different words used in Buddhist texts, depending on context, that we all just have more or less one word, or second word, consciousness. That's about it, very limited range. But in the Buddhist tradition, they have lots of different words. But even that, all those words, they say, they are just the finger pointing to the moon. You need to look for that moon. Yes?
So, trying to find the answer for mind, are we using our mind to find the answer?
Oh. Yeah, tell me next week, okay? Sorry, Joe. If he stays up all night and can't wake up the next day, it's not my fault. It seems like it would be, right? At least, yeah, it would seem like the mind is searching for the mind. But what is it? That's the kind of questioning. Like when you say, oh, the mind is this, it's like, wait, then my mind. So wait, now there are two things, right? It's not just semantic, because we do feel and behave like that. My mind, okay, right there. Look into that. And when we say look, we are not talking about intellectually, like rationally trying to figure it out. Pay attention to the feeling tone. Pay attention to how it feels when you bring up that question. And you will see a little bit of what the boy is saying, Just when you think it's not there, from the corner of your eye, you see it. huh? Like its shadow, like it just like ran away. It's like, ah, right there. And then it's gone. And then when you think it's gone, right? You're like, wait, obviously it's here. Because something is going on here. But what is this something? Yeah, it's said that when we begin to kind of turn inwards in that sense. But this is not the kind of turning inwards where you relax and, there is, a good reason to cultivate the ability to just quiet the mind, for sure. But that is a preliminary step to knowing thyself, knowing yourself. In order to know, we need to know how to be quiet. But don't get stuck in enjoying the quiet. And then it says that becomes a trap. It's like a drug. You just want to escape into the quiet. It's like, I can't deal with Black Friday. There used to be people standing on the roads with big signs saying, don't buy anything. Now, I guess everyone realized that you somehow have to hack into people's phones to tell them that, right? No one's really driving around buying anything anymore. So, we're done this evening. Next week, right, we have class. Yes. There's one date change. The 22nd, we will not meet. Instead, we will meet the 29th of December. Yeah, 22nd we will not meet, but 29th we will meet. Originally, we were going to meet on the 22nd and not the 29th. And then I was like, no, that doesn't make sense. So we won't meet on the 22nd, we'll meet on the 29th. So basically from now until, the 22nd we don't meet, but every Thursday we will meet. Yeah. Any last questions in case you can't go to sleep if I don't? Oh, you again? Yes.
I have a comment.
Yes.
just noticed that little projector thingy is the same one my teacher has.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
Lips down and a little.
Anyone else? Anything? Yes, Alex.
So, I got the sense that the Magda area.
Magadha.
Magadha, yeah, like more religious autonomy. Is that like the idea, or is that?
Not necessarily so much religious autonomy. Of course, we were taking a snapshot of a period where it was very vibrant. Yeah, I don't want to suggest that on this other side, on the Western side, spiritually is not so vibrant. Yeah? It's a matter of when you take the snapshot. We were taking a snapshot right when things were going on, which is starting from the 8th century BCE. There is like this outburst of spiritual fervor, of people questioning. But the point I was trying to make, which will make more sense as the course goes, is that that instead of the old story, as William was telling it, like Siddhartha was questioning Vedic Brahmanical religion, and that whatever he came up with was as a counterpoint to Brahmanical religion, actually maybe not. Yeah, maybe not that. So the other thing is that I think is very common, like in some of the writings that you're going to encounter, like more recent publications on Buddhism, it will say things like, well, Siddhartha accepted ideas like karma and reincarnation because that's what everybody believed. So he just, he just went along with it. So you find that kind of reasoning argued by there's a subgroup of Buddhists here called secular Buddhists. some of you may not know what I'm talking about, but there's a subgroup. I mean, they're very serious Buddhists, but they're very proud with, we are secular Buddhists. So they're like, rebirth, that's just some old grandmother tale that, somehow because the Buddha's audience, they believe that, so he was just working along with what they believed in. That ultimately he did not believe in rebirth, he did not believe in karma. Or at least, the full power of his tradition does not involve rebirth and karma. But the evidence that we have don't go in that direction. As much as you want to believe that, that's fine. If you want to believe that, sure, you might even say, I got a vision from the Buddha, and he said, no, I didn't believe it. Okay, fine. Yeah, but you can't make that argument based on saying, well, the earliest sources show, the earliest sources do show that, no, he argued against those who said, that there's no multiple lifetimes. He argued against that. And it wasn't a given. In fact, in the Magadha area, these positions, there were some who said, there's no such thing. He said, no, there is. No, there's no karma. He said, there is. And then some would say, this is how karma works. So the one tradition in there, the Jain tradition that continues to this day. Now, of course, what I'm saying, right, is not accurate to what Jains believe. What I'm saying is how Buddhists understood Jains back when. From the Buddhist understanding, what the Jains teach about karma is any and all actions. Whether intended or unintended, they are all karma, and therefore they all produce results. So how do you solve the problem of karma? How do you solve the problem of karma? Any guesses?
No action.
No action. And quite literally, no action. And this is now here, it's not a Buddhist bias. It's true, some extreme forms of Jainism, not all Jains, just like, some extreme Christians or extreme Buddhists or Muslims or Mormons, right? They practice basically, not like when you're young and healthy, but an ideal way to die is to stop eating and drinking, to minimize karma. Because the act of drinking and eating is a type of karma that will produce results that will drag you on to future lifetimes. So the problem of action is to completely stop acting. And the ideal is literally, if you get it, you just sit there and wait until everything ends. And the Buddha rejected that. So Buddha famously said, karma is intention. Meaning, like sneezing, right? It's not a karmic act. Because that's just the body's reflex. So it's not intention. Now, unless you're like, I'm going to give that guy COVID, then that becomes an intentional action, sneezing. You induce the sneeze to try to give the virus. But otherwise, so the Buddha says, what makes an action a karmic action is actions motivated by intention. A particular intention is there. Then it's a karmic act. Then it produces results. Then it will drag you on to future lifetimes helplessly. Yeah? We'll look more at the Buddha's way of talking about karma. Good? Again, thank you for coming out. Thank you for all of you out there. I think you all can unmute yourselves now, or maybe not, I don't know. So yeah. Oh, in the back there is a bunch of snacks. Please pick something up on your way out so that we are not having to keep this for next week. I think we forgot to announce. There is quite a display of enjoyments. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
See you.
And how is the payment going to work?
Oh.
Or the donation, or whatever.
Oh, just put it in the box.
Like a $50.
Whatever amount
Put it where?
in the donation
Oh,
box.
okay,
Yeah, yeah. No hurry. At some point,
okay.
whatever you're inspired to do, we
Right.
happily receive it.
Right. I just didn't know